There is no such thing as good foods or bad foods. Now, I know what you're thinking. This dietitian is totally full of shit. After all, there's been billions of dollars invested into the system that convinces us that there is foods that are better or worse for us, healthy or unhealthy, or simply just junk. I want to offer you a different perspective, the concept of food neutrality. Food neutrality is the idea that there are no foods that are morally superior. There are foods that play different roles in the body. There are foods that we need for different instances in our lives and different ways that we're utilizing our body, but there are no better or worse foods. In fact, the only foods that you shouldn't be eating are foods that are expired, have mold on them, you don't like, are poisonous, maybe you're allergic to, or maybe your dog took a bite out of. However, even that's negotiable depending on how much you like your dog. Now, the concept of food neutrality explores that all food has nutritional value to offer simply because it's food, right? So when we think about a food, it's either got carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and all of those nutrients are things that our body needs to sustain life. So, by the very essence that it is food, it is something that is going to benefit the body. Now, I know what you're saying. Sheena, there are foods that clearly have more nutrients in them. And yeah, that's true. However, we don't need all of the nutrients in the world. In fact, for certain activities that we perform on a daily basis, we don't need even a plethora of those nutrients in any given instance. So the food should fit the function that is performing. And that changes all throughout the duration of the day, which means we need accumulation of different types of food to sustain all of the activities that our body needs. So, while food like broccoli, which contains vitamin C, iron, B6, magnesium, fiber, and all of those goodies in it, might be more quote unquote nutritionally dense than something like a soda, which basically just consists of simple sugars, it doesn't necessarily make it better. In fact, for certain functions, it doesn't even perform better in the body or give us what we need to sustain uh, the most energy or potentially life in certain situations. So, hear me out. If you are, say, running a marathon or running away from a bear and you've exhausted your energy stores in those moments, potentially suffering from low blood sugars, you're gonna want that soda, that something with simple sugars in it in order to replenish the body in that instance where that's what the body needs to essentially survive. If we have low blood sugars, that can be very dangerous for the body. So if we refuel with broccoli, we're going to be in trouble. And that's a really good example of food neutrality. So while broccoli technically has more nutrients, it doesn't always have the nutrients we need in that moment to sustain what the body needs to perform optimally. Every food offers different substrates that the body needs to utilize in the day in order to function optimally. And the great thing is, your body actually knows what nutrients it needs, and it will crave the foods that are going to give it those nutrients to perform optimally if we learn to eat intuitively and honor those cues. So we don't actually have to worry about self moderation of these foods because our body's actually just going to crave them. You might notice that sometimes, hey, we are really craving protein or you're really craving a salad. And that's because our body might be a little bit deprived in these nutrients in that moment. And that's okay. So we want to create a accumulation of different types of foods throughout the day to meet all of our nutrient needs rather than saying this is a good food and this is a bad food and creating those off limits ideas around food. So, really thinking about food in more of a cumulative notion versus this is good or bad. And that good or bad mentality is really going to cause you to create food rules, have food guilt, restrict food, potentially engage in binge restrict cycles, and also deprive your body of the nutrients that it needs in the long run because we are no longer able to tune into those cues about what the body needs. Another thing to remember about food neutrality is that enough is as good as a feast. So, when we think about things like superfoods and that we should just get as much of these foods in as humanly possible because they are quote unquote the most nutrient dense, know that our body can actually only utilize up to a certain percentage of the nutrients from these food in a day or in a certain time period. So having more of these nutrients and getting as much as humanly possible while restricting other food types because these might be the quote unquote bad foods is actually not doing you any favors. And it is not causing any more nutrient utilization just because you've shoved more of that nutrient into the body. So that's just a bit of food for the thought for the day. Listen to your body. It's smarter than the tabloids.